All right, so what is your current take on the current space politics and the different policies that are going on right now, especially in Congress?
Well, I mean, we could begin and end this discussion by just giving NASA a penny on the dollar instead of a half a penny, right? We would have no political debates. I think to say you're spending money on NASA is a flawed concept. It is an investment. Now, we can maybe point out some places where NASA could be more efficient, and we could go on about that. But generally speaking, the bang, if you will, for the buck that you get out of NASA is extraordinary. I always say when people say, when they get upset with me about spending money on NASA, and I explain to them, how much money is spent on NASA, number one, they're surprised. But what that tells me, frankly, is that NASA is an incredibly powerful investment. For a half a penny on the dollar, everybody knows what NASA does. NASA reaches students, it is pound for pound the most well-known public agency you can imagine, as well-known as any, for the price. So I think that, we need to think about that for just a moment. Forget for a moment that, who's getting jobs in what district. And think about what that means to the country and what a true exploration program, a mission to Mars would mean for students, for that the innovation that it would inspire. I think if we really could look at it in those terms, there wouldn't be much political debate. And space used to be that way, but it's, we're in a different era right now, and everybody doesn't like ideas that were brought forth by the other party, no matter what the ideas might be. And so you end up with conservative Republicans defending jobs programs in their district, and Democrats advocating for free enterprise. Well, that's inside the looking glass stuff. And the fact that we're at this point where that has happened tells me we've got a pretty polluted political environment. That's not a newsflash. I would like to see space emerge from that political debate. It could be one thing that could bind us together.
So what sort of event do you think that would need to take place before that would happen? And to also have the president, like you said, to make that statement, let's go on to Mars?
Well, I don't know. I think it's a lot of people just pray for the Chinese to plant a flag on the moon and that'll get everybody all riled up. I don't think it will necessarily. I mean, the fact that we went to, first of all, we've been to the moon. We've done that. We've been there and done that, as has been said by the president. And secondly, it was in the context of true, real and present Cold War fears, which we don't perceive the Chinese as that kind of threat, like we perceive the Soviet Union to be that kind of threat. So I'm not sure that dynamic, that motivator, fear, essentially, is going to work. Will fear get us to Mars? I don't think so. So what's another great motivator? Greed. So let's let the free market get in the mix here. Let's let greed take hold for a little bit in space and see where that leads us. And I do think that, I think if we let this little private enterprise component percolate a little bit, if we fund the airmail for a little bit longer, who would have thought in 1925 we'd have a 787? I mean, you can't conceive. It's hard to imagine where these things might lead. And so I think I think it'll happen, but it'll happen in a more evolutionary way than it did back in the 60s. But I think in the end that is really good, because what we did, we created a program that was a sprint. And because it was a sprint, it was inherently unsustainable. And so what will evolve out of this, if we do it right, and if we allow it to just percolate and be a little bit patient about it, what will evolve will be something truly sustainable, something that will be there for future generations. There was nothing about Apollo that was really going to continue on because it was a throwaway program. It did what it was supposed to do, but it wasn't the von Braun vision of how you colonize space. Allowing private enterprise to do what it does right now in low Earth orbit, I think, is the first step to making that happen. It's not how von Braun envisioned it, but I think it could happen.
Do you think that there's going to be any more surprises out there, such as the announcement of Stratolaunch and Planetary Resources? Do you think there's another organization or development out there that's going to take everyone by storm?
It's pretty hard to beat gold mining on an asteroid or whatever mining there is. I don't know how you top that one. That just gets that's beyond Hollywood, right? Who knows? Who knows? I'm always interested. I have been consistently interested in geoengineering schemes Is there a way to potentially shade the planet in ways that can modify our thermostat? I'm fascinated by solar power in space. I continue to believe that someday that's going to make sense, especially when you look at the cost of nuclear power and you look at the alternatives we have here. So I think there are other industries. Listen, right now we're at $10,000 a pound to get to low Earth orbit. If Elon Musk is successful and gets us down below $1,000, we could have conversations about all kinds of things like this. Yeah, putting a solar array in space at $1,000 a pound or less, suddenly you start doing the math and compare that to the cost of putting a nuclear power plant online, it actually starts to make sense. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of these things that are a little bit, still in the snicker factor stage right now because we haven't driven the cost down. But now with the private enterprise in there, the cost inevitably will go down. You can't drive costs down on a cost-plus contract. It is inherently, fundamentally, will not happen. When the amount of money you make is based on the fact that you spend more doing something, it'll never get cheaper, ever. We are now in a mode now where that is happening. And as that happens, and we're going to watch it for safety, of course. As that happens, there are all kinds of things that are going to transcend tourism as potential space industries.
Do you think that eventually it might transition to a part where it's not only tourism, but it's the citizens who are the ones exploring space? If the price can get down to that level, do you think that it would be way more commonplace instead of just only 500 people ever flying in space that your everyday man would partake in?
Well, I sure hope so. I think we all need to go out there and stake our claim. Let's all go to the moon and stake off 40 acres and see if we can plant something. We'll be helium-3 farmers, right? No, I think it's still going to be a while before you have, the proverbial covered wagon going out into space and colonizing. But there are people on this planet today who would take a one-way trip to Mars to set up shop, and who knows where that leads. Listen, eventually this planet, it's a long way off, kids, but eventually this planet and this solar system is not going to be habitable. It actually, when you think about all of our advances, all of our knowledge, all the things we have accomplished here on this planet, to imagine that one day it'll all be for naught is kind of a sad thing. So we have the opportunity before we run out of resources, and that we will start to get on the back end of that eventually. We have the opportunity now to think about becoming truly a multi-planet species. We can do that. It's still a distant dream, but if we don't, it's a one-step thing, and Elon Musk is part of that. SpaceX and Dragon is part of that process. The shuttle was part of that process. Neil Armstrong on the moon was part of that process. All these things it's taken a while, but I'm hoping that these steps will continue, and maybe putting the private enterprise in there will accelerate it some.